Hey, what's going on everybody? This is RobWillis.info here, and in this video I want to talk about installing VMware vSphere ESXi 6.5. If you're not familiar with ESXi, you should check out my previous video where I give a brief overview of both ESXi as well as vCenter, and I'll have links to that down below. Alright, so jumping right into things, we got some physical hardware and we also have an ISO image downloaded from VMware, and I'll have links to that stuff down below. But how do we install it and where do we install it to? So the first thing I'll do is take the ISO image and install it or copy it over to a USB drive and make a bootable USB drive, and I'll use Rufus to do that. And then I'll actually install it into the USB drive on the right hand side, which will be in the server and left in the server after the install is complete, and I'll boot from that drive. So because the ESXi image is so small and it's just loaded into memory anyway, I can just install it to the USB drive rather than installing it to a hard drive and wasting a whole hard disk for that. So if you go around to the back of my server stack here, you'll notice that I've actually done this with every single one of my servers, and it's an awesome solution. It works out really well. It's super cheap. I used 8 gig drives here, but that's just because I got a lot of them at one time. I think I got like 8 of them for super cheap, but I've been doing this for a long time now, and it's kind of the recommended and preferred way to boot ESXi. And so that's just what I've been doing, and it works great, and it's super easy and cheap to do. Some servers like your Dell PowerEdges will actually have an internal USB header specifically for this purpose. Alright, so now I'm over on my Windows 10 machine, and I've already gone ahead and downloaded the ESXi image from VMware along with a tool called Rufus, and I'll have links to both of those down below. But I'm going to use Rufus to create a bootable USB drive that using the ESXi ISO that I downloaded, and then I'm going to boot the server using that USB drive and install ESXi on it. So you'll notice that in this folder I have a few VMware images along with Rufus, but this image on the bottom is the one I'm actually going to be using. That's my ESXi image, and I'm just going to double click to open Rufus and give it a second here. So you'll notice the first option on the Rufus dialog is the device, and this is where you'll select the USB drive that you want to install the ISO to. And then the next thing is this little disk drive icon here, and this is where we're going to select the ISO image. And it actually opened up to the folder where my image is, so I'm just going to go ahead and select the ESXi image and click open, and then go ahead and click start. And we immediately see a dialog warning that the ISO seems to have obsolete menu systems, and I'm just going to click yes to replace those. And then it gives us a warning that it's going to erase all data on the drive, and I click OK to continue. So that's it. It's going to go ahead and install this ISO image on this USB drive and make it bootable at the same time. And then we can go ahead and boot that in the server and install ESXi. So I'm just going to go ahead and skip ahead a little bit to when it's complete, and then we'll go from there. Alright, so the process has completed. It successfully wrote the ISO image to the USB drive, and it's ready to be used for boot. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out and remove the USB drive from this box, and I'm going to plug it into my server and make sure that it's set as the USB drive is set as the primary boot device on that server, and then boot the ESXi image from there. So let's go ahead and do that now. Alright, so now I'm over on the server, and it's getting ready to boot the ESXi image, and we see that it pops up here, and I'm just going to go ahead and hit enter to continue on with the installer, and we see that it begins to launch the installer. So this is exactly what you would see on the output of your physical machine on the monitor connected to a physical machine, but this is what you would see. I'm actually going to be doing this over console access though, but this part's going to take a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead a little bit until it's fully booted up into the installer process. Alright, so I think it's just about done booting, and it is, and so I'm just going to go ahead and hit enter to continue, and then we see the EULA agreement, and I'm going to hit F11 to accept and continue, and it begins scanning for drives to install ESXi to. So it looks like the installer has found a few drives available that we can install ESXi to, but I'm just going to go with the 8 gig drive. That's going to be my USB drive, and that's the silver one that I showed in the beginning of the video. And then I'm going to select it and hit enter, and then I'm going to select US default for my keyboard layout and go ahead and set the root password for the ESXi host itself. And we see in this case I get prompted that the CPU in this host may not be supported in future ESXi releases, but I can just hit enter to continue on, and then press F11 to confirm and begin the install. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and this part's going to take a few moments, so I'm going to skip ahead a little bit and we'll pick up from there. So the install has now completed, and it says that ESXi will operate in evaluation mode for 60 days. And then after that 60 days we have to license the product to continue using it. And then it also gives you some tips on how to administer the server. And next we have to remove the installation media that we use to install ESXi from the server before rebooting. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that now. So this is going to be the black and red one that I used that created the bootable USB drive with Rufus with. And I'm going to remove that one from the server and leave the silver one in the server, and that one will remain in the server and always be used to boot ESXi. So I'm just going to go ahead and reboot the server now. Alright, so the server should be up in just a second here, and there we go. So it shows some basic information about the host itself, the CPUs, the amount of memory, and then it tells you go download tools to manage this host from these addresses here. And then we notice at the bottom that there's an F2 to customize the system, and then F12 to shut down and restart. And that's it, that's all you'll see. So there's no GUI here. But really all we're going to do is use the F2 to customize the system, set the IP address, and then manage the host remotely through the vSphere console. So I'm just going to hit F2 and ask me to log in with root and the password created during the install. And here we see the very basic customization menu where we can configure the password, various management network options, the keyboard, troubleshooting options, system logs, support information, and resetting the system configuration. Let's take a look at the troubleshooting options real quick. So notice this is where you can enable the ESXi shell as well as SSH if you want to remotely manage the server through SSH, or if you need to access the shell at the console. But for now, let's go ahead and configure the management network. So looking under network adapters, we see this server only has one Ethernet adapter available. But if you had multiples, you can enable multiple NICs for the management network, and it'll load balance across them. And then I'm going to go down to the IPv4 configuration, and I'm going to do set a static IPv4 address, and I'm going to set my static IP here along with the subnet mask and the default gateway. And I'm just going to press enter to save my changes, and then I'm going to go to the IPv6, and I'm actually just going to disable the IPv6 configuration altogether. DNS config, that looks good. I'm just going to leave my default config there, and that's it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit escape to save my changes and exit back. Since I disabled IPv6, I actually need to reboot the host. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now, and when the host comes back up, it should have the new static IP address that I set. Alright, so the server is now back up, and we see that our IP address is successfully taken, and that's it. So we really won't do anything else with the server, the console, from this point on. We'll manage the server entirely from the web-based console. So let's go ahead and do that now. Alright, so I'm back on my Windows 10 machine, and I'm on the same network as the ESXi host. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up my web browser, and I'm going to type in the IP address that I set on the ESXi host, which is 192.168.2.51. And I see that I'm greeted with a certificate warning here. I'm just going to add the exception to get around that, and it's because it's a self-signed certificate. And that's it. It takes us to the ESXi login page, and it takes a second to load here, but I'm just going to log in with the username root and the password that was set during the ESXi install process, and that's it. It then logs us into the web console. So the first page we see gives us some basic information about the host itself. The CPU, the memory, the storage, the version of ESXi that we're running, the time, all of that kind of stuff. Along with some basic actions at the top there where we can get vCenter, create and register a VM, shut the host down, reboot it, refresh, and then our little actions menu there with some additional action items that we can take against the host. And then you'll notice, in addition to these options, there's also a menu on the left-hand side as well. So if we click on Manage, this will give us all of the configuration and management for the ESXi host itself. And you'll notice there's quite a few options to go through here. The System tab has the advanced settings and the auto start features. Hardware provides various information about the host hardware. The licensing, we can add or assign new licenses there. Packages that are installed on the ESXi host itself. Services that are running, we can start and stop them there as well, and along with security and users, and you can create new users, assign new roles, and all that kind of stuff there. And then the next option down is the monitoring. So as you can see, it's got the fancy graphs for the CPU, memory, and monitoring, and all that kind of stuff, along with hardware monitoring, events and tasks that are going on with the ESXi hosts and their statuses, and all that kind of stuff. And the next option down is the virtual machines, and this is probably where you'll be spending the majority of your time. This is where you'll create virtual machines and monitor them, get console access, all that kind of stuff. The next option down is the storage, and this is where you'll see existing data stores that are attached to the host, as well as where you'll go to add new ones. And then the last option on the left is going to be the virtual networking. And this is where you're going to go to configure and adjust all things virtual networking for this single host in particular. You've got your port group options where you can add new port groups, virtual switches. There's the physical NICs and their configuration, the VM kernel NICs. There's options for the TCP IP stacks, firewall rules, and all of that kind of stuff. There's a ton of options under just the networking alone. But again, this is just going to be for this single host. So let's go back to the storage and add some additional local data stores. I'm going to click on New Data Store, and then I want to create a new VMFS data store. So I'm just going to leave that selected and click Next. And then you'll see I actually have two local drives available to me, a 100 gig and a 40 gig. So I'm just going to leave the first one selected, and I'm just going to type in 100 gig -local, so that I know it's 100 gig of locally attached storage. And I'm just going to click Next, and I'm going to use the full disk for this, so I'm just going to leave the default and click Next. And I'm going to go ahead and click Finish. And it pops up and says the entire disk is about to be wiped. Am I sure that I want to do this? And I'm just going to click Yes to continue. And now once that data store is successfully added, which it is now, I'm going to go ahead and add an additional data store to add that additional 40 gig that we saw earlier. And I'm just going to follow the exact same steps. Alright, so that's it. We've now added two additional data stores to our ESXi host, and now we can upload ISO images, create virtual machines, and do all kind of stuff. So the first thing I want to do is upload an ISO image of an operating system so I can use it to boot my virtual machines from. So I'm going to go to my storage and click on the 40 gig local storage and click on the data store browser. And then here you'll notice that you can upload and download files from the data store. So I'm just going to click on upload and click my local downloads folder where I've already downloaded an Ubuntu 16 image, and I'm going to select it and click open, and that's it. It begins uploading the ISO image. And you can see the progress in the top right of the window here, but I'm just going to go ahead and click close, and the job will drop to the background and continue running. But we can see the progress in the recent taskbar down here at the bottom. And that's it. So basically it's just going to continue to upload that file in the background there, but once the file is uploaded, we can then go ahead and use it to boot virtual machines. So I'm just going to go ahead and skip ahead a little bit to whenever the file is completed, and we'll go from there. So this download should be done any second now. And yep, there it goes. So basically at this point, now that the ISO image is uploaded, we can then go and create a virtual machine and attach the ISO to the CD-ROM and then boot it. So let's go ahead and click on virtual machines, and I'm going to create register VM, and I'm going to create a new virtual machine and click next. And then here it asks us to name the virtual machine, and this is the name that we'll see in the ESXi web console, but I'm just going to name it Ubuntu 1, and for compatibility I'll just go with the highest level, ESXi 6.5. For my guest OS family, I'm going to pick Linux, and go at guest OS version, I'm going to do Ubuntu Linux 64-bit and click next. And then it asks me to select the storage that I want to create this virtual machine on, so I'll just go with that 40 gig local and click next. And then here we're going to customize the settings for the virtual machine. So this is where you'll find the vCPU settings, the memory, the hard disk, the network adapters, what network it's actually on, and all that kind of stuff. So you see that you can adjust the vCPUs, and it'll be limited by how many cores are on the actual physical host machine. So in this case I can go up to 6. But you can adjust the memory up or down, change the hard disk size, attach additional network controllers or network adapters, and in this case I'm going to change the DVD-ROM or DVD drive to a data store ISO file. So I'm going to go to that 40 gig local drive and our data store, and I'm going to select the Ubuntu image that we just uploaded a little bit earlier, and make sure that that DVD drive is connected, and that's it. And so I'm just going to go ahead and click next. So now whenever I power on this virtual machine, it should boot that ISO image. So we review the settings, they're all correct, and that's it. I'm going to go ahead and hit finish, and it goes and creates the virtual machine. So now that the VM's been created, let's go ahead and get console access by right-clicking on it, and you can either download the VMRC, the remote client, or if you already have, you can go ahead and launch the console. And I'm just going to click remember my choice and open the link, and it should actually open in the VMware remote console. And then once we get the console access, we can go ahead and power the virtual machine on. So we're just going to always trust the certificate and connect anyway. And that's it. Let's go ahead and power this bad boy on. So I just right click power and power on, and we see the virtual machine boot, and it starts loading the ISO image. So now we can go ahead and install Ubuntu Linux on this virtual machine. Once the OS is installed, the virtual machine will act just like a physical machine on the network. It'll have its own IP. You'll have to SSH in to manage it. You can still get console access through the VMware console like this, but it'll act like its own complete entity on the network. Alright, so now that we got that out of the way, let's go ahead and power off the virtual machine. So I'm just going to right click power off, and it will ask me to confirm yes, and it just immediately powers off the virtual machine. So now let's go ahead and right click and just see what options are available to us. So obviously we have the power settings, the guest options, that's just to shut down and install VMware tools, the snapshots, so you can roll the virtual machine forward and back in time. We already saw the console options. You can export the virtual machine. You can edit the settings, unregister it, delete it from the hypervisor. Let's go ahead and take a look at the edit settings. So you should recognize these items from earlier, but we can actually add additional hard disk and network adapters and other devices here, along with adjusting the CPU and the memory. And the virtual machine will most likely have to be off for those two. There are some hot add options that you can enable, but they can be kind of risky. The data store ISO image that we mounted earlier to the DVD drive, we can change that to another ISO image, or we could just disconnect it altogether. The video card, you can adjust all those settings there. And that's it. So I'm just going to go ahead and cancel all that and not save any changes, but just so you know, that's where you would go to change the virtual machine settings after the virtual machine's been created. So you may have noticed whenever I right clicked that I didn't have the option to clone a virtual machine, and that's because you need vCenter to be able to do that. I also don't have any of the live migration or migration at all features. I can't create templates, I can't do distributed switches, any of those kind of things. So while ESXi is great for running, standalone hypervisors, maybe a few of them, there's no way to centrally manage them. You have to log into each one individually and manage the virtual machines that are located on that host and only that host. There are some ways to copy or clone virtual machines without vCenter, but most of them are either aren't the easiest way to do it, or require third-party tools, and they will most likely require the virtual machine to be powered off anyway. So if you really want to get into cloning and live migration and all that kind of stuff, that's where you really need to look into bringing vCenter into the environment. All in all though, vSphere ESXi is a great hypervisor, especially in version 6.5. It is definitely the best version yet. Both vSphere ESXi and vCenter are available for free for download from VMware.com. And they both install in evaluation mode for 60 days, so it's really easy to get copies of it from VMware. Install it in your environment and get a whole VMware lab going pretty easily and for free. And for 60 days, you can kind of get a lot done and really play around and explore the features. And then, of course, after those 60 days, you'll either have to license it, which you can get a free license for ESXi from VMware. And it's pretty flexible, and it's just a standalone license for a single ESXi host. But, you can do all the things that a single ESXi host is limited to. But it still makes ESXi pretty useful to keep around with that license in a lab environment. And then vCenter obviously is pretty expensive, and you'll have to look into how you'll budget that into your IT department and all of those fun things. But yeah, so there is one last thing I want to mention, and that is that you still can connect with the old vSphere 6 FAT client or the C# client. So let me just go ahead and demo that real quick, and then we'll wrap things up. Alright, so here she goes, the good old VMware vSphere client, the C# or FAT client. So this is the newest one I could find. This is version 6, I believe. But I type in the IP address of my ESXi 6.5 host and my username and password, and it'll go ahead and log me on. So it does work when you connect directly to ESXi host, but it does not look like it works whenever you connect to vCenter 6.5. But you see that it successfully logs me on, and it looks like the good old FAT client. And I think that's where I'm going to wrap this one up. Next time I'll cover installing vCenter into the environment and deploying it as the vCenter server appliance on top of an ESXi host, and then adding ESXi host into that vCenter's inventory and cloning and migrating and all of that kind of fun stuff. I hope you guys found this video informal and helps you guys figure out some things and get VMware ESXi up and running in your own lab environments and playing around with it. And also playing with vCenter, even if it's only the trial. But as always, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.